I guarantee you can paint this and I'll show you how, but before I grab my brushes, these are the 2 rules we need to remember. Light travels in all directions and it diminishes with distance. The easiest way to think about it is with some imaginary bubbles representing which color will go where. I started from my darkest color, which was a red with a pinch of purple. In contrast to adding black, this will give me a more chromatic darker tone. The trickiest part of this technique is properly placing the light reflection. So apart from anything obvious, like the arm that's holding the flame or the side of the head exposed to the flame, I'll often move the model around, look from the point of view of the flame and ask myself what I can see and what I cannot. I can see some of the left shoulder, so that's a yes, but I certainly cannot see the bottom side of the arm holding the flame, so that's a no. I can also see the knee, but remember that that's outside the bubble I imagined. For now, we just have to remain within the first bubble and work one area at a time. Start with the obvious parts before the trickier ones, and check your work through the view of the light source as you move from one area to the other. This first step will always change from model to model depending on the light source, and it is fine if it takes you a bit longer to lay out the groundwork, but moving on to the lighter colors, things will become easier. All the texture on this model makes it perfect for dry brushing. However, before I began, I added a bit of moisture to my brush in order to reduce the dusty finish dry brushing often leaves behind. By doing this, I was able to achieve a smoother application. And I am not looking for my brush to be wet, but rather lightly damp. Here is how my first bubble ended up looking. I can always add more later, but looking at it from every angle, everything seems in order when it comes to the rule of light traveling in all directions in a straight line. With the basic sketch ready, I moved on to a mix of red and a pinch of orange. There are no new areas to work on, I just have to add a lighter tone over the same areas as before, but taking into account my smaller bubble. So for example, the chest and left shoulder would now be out of the equation, but for the helmet and the arm holding the flame, everything looks to be still within my light zone. Remember also that light doesn't wrap around objects, so the side of the head opposite to the flame, although close, should remain in shadow. And I'll admit I went a bit overboard with the red, so take this as an example of a little mistake. Moving on, I used a mix of orange and yellow, and just as before, I evaluate my bubble and assess what's in and what's out, to then add the lighter layer over the previous one. But the rules I'm providing you with are not set in stone. While they are the way to go, if we are looking for a realistic and credible result, we must not forget that we are painting, and rules mustn't shackle our creativity. While this reflection ended up a bit bigger than the initial bubble sketch, I thought adding more of this yellowish tone on the helmet area resulted in a more eye-catching piece. So with that in mind, I ended up extending both the orange and red bubbles a bit further out to compensate. Finally comes the yellow, and with it one of the most important rules when painting OSL. No reflection should be brighter than the light source, and be careful with making the reflection as bright as the light source. To keep it safe, I'll keep my brightest color exclusively to the light source only. When it comes to metallic surfaces as an example, it would be correct if they reflected as much light as the light source, but I want to keep this video simple and not fuss around with the reflectiveness of different materials. To paint the flames, I took a simpler approach than usual if you've watched my fire painting tutorials, beginning with a wash of white on the recesses over an orange base coat. This would be followed by a yellow wash, which would shine the brightest over the white due to its transparency, and less so over the not so deep recesses of orange, while still making them brighter. All in all, looking to establish the inner parts of the fire as the brightest and warmest. With the wash dry and the inner heat source established, I corrected any overspill of yellow with a dry brush of orange. Unlike my water trick method, this might not create the smoothest result, but for a gaming piece is more than enough. I finished off with a dry brush of red, focusing on the tips of the flames. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something useful out of it. If you have any questions on something I didn't explain properly, leave it down in the comments and I'll get to it shortly. And if you want to watch more guides on this technique, check out my OSL dedicated playlist linked in the description. For now, thank you for watching.